Hi, everybody. It's the Week in the Tackle podcast, the podcast where we get together on a weekly basis and tackle things in the world of football and/or soccer that we thought were interesting. I'm Tom Rennie. Alongside me is MLS legend and top broadcaster, king of Botox himself, Brian Dunseth. Hey, Dunny, you all right?
I'm good. It's just the filter, Rennie. I keep telling you. It's not the Botox, it's the filter. I'm fantastic. Good to be back with you. Good that you have your voice.
Yes.
And I'm happy that you recovered just in time to grab a couple of free bottles of the Carabao.
Do you know, I was I've got to apologise to our listeners. I wasn't available last week. I did the Wolverhampton Wanderers Everton game on the Saturday night with Dave Kitson, and classic Dave, he turned up half an hour late, so I had a lot of filling to do. I love you, Dave. I do. He's
classic.
But he's classic. He's classic. So I talked a bit more than I wanted to, and the game was a bit rubbish and whatnot, but I just lost my voice. I get laryngitis. I lost it for like 3 days. And I was doing the Carabao Cup Final this weekend, so I was in full panic mode. I've got to get my voice back. Like, it's very complicated to get into the game anyway, and it's me and Chris Perry doing it, and it's all done and signed and sealed, and it's happening. And I was like, I can't speak. So I had to pull out of the podcast last week, so I can only apologize. We'll make this show double good. We'll make it double good in order to make up for it. I have cracked open a 0.5% unfiltered lager here. So guess we'll just see how the show goes. Guess we'll see how it progresses. Shall we start with the Carabao Cup Final? I want to talk to you about the football element of it, but I was at the game, doing the commentary of the game, which I very much enjoyed. Love doing the Cup Finals. And something really interesting happened. And it's sort of a bit of a Wembley balls up, in that I'm normally, so I've actually sat for the last like 8 or 9 Cup Finals I've been to, wherever the winning fans are. So either east or west side of the centre. I was meant to be in the east. There was some technical issue over there, so they moved me to the other side. So I was meant to be in with the Liverpool fans, because it's sort of either side of the centre, so they're just in front of you. But I actually got into the side where the Newcastle fans were, and because of where they had to put me kind of late notice, quite far to the right. So I'm only about 8 or 9 rows away from the Newcastle fans. So during the game, it was sort of a bit of a problem. I couldn't quite see like Dan Burn scoring. Obviously, after a second, you can see it's this giant human. And there was a great message we got during the game, which was Dan Burn clearly being the biggest. Surely he should just eat the others, which I thought was great. So you could see it, but it just took me another couple of seconds to be like, that's definitely Dan Burn, right? And it was. So you're a bit far away. But the good element was, and I do want to talk a bit about the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia and that element of it, which, you know, did spoil it a bit when I did
Knew it was coming. Yeah.
When I saw the chairman on the field holding the trophy in the air, I did lose my.
We did it.
Yes, I lost my. Isn't this a magical moment at that point? But there was a bit after the full-time whistle goes. Look, everyone knows the story by now. They've not won in England since the FA Cup in 1955. They'd lost 9 straight finals at Wembley. Some great teams: Alan Shearer, Rob Lee, Les Ferdinand. You know, incredible players: Warren Barton and, you know, Philippe Albert. These brilliant players they had.
Yeah, Joey Barton.
Less so that one. I'm not sure. Did he lose a final with them? I think he won the championship with them. But
Kieran
whatever.
Dyer punch up in the middle of the field.
Yeah, it's been for a long time as well. You're right. Sorry, Tim. But like, there was some great teams that lost finals, and like they hadn't scored at Wembley since Rob Lee in 1995 in the FA Cup semi-final, or a little bit later than that, 98 maybe. So like, there's loads of great history, and like when the full-time whistle went and they'd won the game and they deserved to win, and we'll talk about the game itself. I looked just to my right, maybe about 8 to 10 feet, something like that. And I'd seen a family sort of to our right. There was a couple of older women, like 60 plus, like grandmother sort of age. There was some younger men, about 45, that sort of age. Then there was kids between like 17 and then proper children, like under 10. And they're all sort of together. There's like 10, 15 of them. Also lots of sort of grown men as well, like 30 plus with scars on and whatnot. And like 10 of them were just crying. They were just crying their eyes out. There was a guy who looked like a bouncer at a really awful club, and he just had his Newcastle scarf over his face, and I could just see him fully sobbing at the concept of Newcastle winning a trophy. And I am a cynical person, and I do want to talk about Saudi Arabia and you know, Alexander Isak scored the winning goal. It's not coincidence, these two things. But I was just so pleased for these guys, because it is a business, and there's nothing these people who are grandfathered in could do.
Yeah.
And it's such a before even the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia knew where the city of Newcastle was, this has been like their religion, and it's sort of a cathedral in the city because it's quite a one-level city. And the stadium, St James's Park, if you've been to Newcastle, you can
Yeah.
see it from everywhere. You can sort of, it's like a sundial, right? You know where you are depending on the shadow from St James's in the day. So, and I was just really pleased for them. And I did obviously think about myself. And I thought, like that moment in Prague where they won it and you couldn't believe it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And Chris Perry was next to me, and he's a Wimbledon fan, and he was telling us on air about the time Wimbledon won the FA Cup in 1988. The crazy gang beat the Culture Club. He was there as it would have been a teenager, I guess, early teenager, maybe even like 10 years old, something like that. And he was just talking about that, and it was just Dunny, that element of it before the cynicism and before the seeing the guy from the public investment fund bit. I did think I am really, really pleased for these people because
Yeah.
not everyone gets to experience it. And on the other side, it would have been, oh, we've won our 19th trophy. Like, who gives a
Yeah.
Sorry, Tim.
Yeah. Sorry, Tim. Yeah, there's a couple things at play here. And again, I believe if you can put the cynicism aside and you just think about the beauty of the moment for this fan base that had through the Mike Ashley years also, I mean, dealt with the horrific teeter-totter swing of do we have a chance? Do we not have a chance? Are we going to stay up? Are we going to go down? What does the bleak future looks like with the fact that there is no real investment in this club? On top of that, what was it 2 years ago, losing out to Manchester United, being so close and yet so far away. So the context to it is kind of fascinating when you pull back the curtain and you start thinking about from a Liverpool perspective. Without a shadow of a doubt, the worst week they could have possibly had, getting knocked out by PSG, seeing this loss, taking away a trophy, but this weird oddity that everyone's kind of okay with the fact that systematically they got dismantled from the opening whistle to the final whistle. It's a fact where like Mo Salah and Jota were non-factors whatsoever. That set pieces you elected to create a formation that allows McAllister to be responsible for Dan Burn until afterwards you go for Kwanzaa. Arnie Slot talking about afterwards, not only the explanation behind the marking, but that they were outplayed, that Newcastle absolutely deserved it. But the feeling amongst Liverpool fans is it's almost like that sucked. That would have been nice. But like, well, we still got the Premier League title because we're 12 points clear. So I think it just shows you the juxtaposition of like what is happening at Newcastle, or at least what they want. A couple of years ago was qualifying for Champions League, trying to hope that they would somehow be in touch and continue the evolution or at least the escalation to be one of the top 5, top 6 teams in the Premier League, kind of have this conversation, which is now Nottingham Forest and the consistency of Aston Villa. That's what Newcastle was a couple of seasons ago. So they get a trophy. And I think also, again, putting the cynicism aside, it's kind of great for Eddie Howe, for a manager that you and I were talking about in the early days of this podcast, thinking about guys like Deutsche at Burnley and at the time Eddie Howe at Bournemouth, and even the cynicism surrounding his appointment at Newcastle when you're on the backside of Jose Mourinho being named, Unai Emery being named, Mauricio Pochettino being named, and you go with Eddie Howe and you're like, well, this will be a short-term thing. He understands relegation battle, to now Champions League experience, a team that continues to methodically invest in its group. And I think overall, a spirit on the field specific to like Joe Linton and Tonali and Bruno Guimaraes in that midfield of being one of the most interesting trifectas that you never want to play against. So great story with Dan Burn at this stage. I mean, he scores this game winner for his beloved Newcastle. He literally probably has a night out on the piss and has to join up with the England national team squad and Thomas Tuchel for his very first time. And Alexander Isak, I believe it's something like 27 goal contributions in his last 26 matches, some crazy statistic. For a guy that was lanky and skinny and questioned about not the technical ability, but the physicality and how he would survive. And what it would have been had he not scored that second goal after having a goal previously chalked off, a few minutes later. So a real fascinating juxtaposition of a tournament that we all feel is probably the least ranked in importance that's available to teams of this stature. But again, I know, and I'm totally good with going into it, but the way that I think we assessed what Newcastle was going to be, Man City spending-esque immediately, maybe because they were unable to spend, maybe that's been beneficial in ways beyond our, true understanding, because they have had to be very smart with their investment. And
Yes.
for the most part, they haven't really missed on their choices when you compare and contrast what you've seen from other clubs.
No, look, I think that's fair. And I think that they haven't broken the rules or bent the rules, and they have, in fact, been financially constrained by the rules and regulations in the Premier League. And Eddie Howe mentioned that in his kind of post-game press conference, how much this group has been together for quite a long time. Like the starting 11 that played in this game were all there last season. Most of the bench was all there last season. If not all the bench, I'd need to double check that. But I think pretty much everyone was there. 11 of the starters from 2 years ago are still in the squad. So there's not been a great deal of churn and change at Newcastle. I wonder if there will be in the near future. And look, it was difficult with Yazir Al Rumayyan, the chair of Saudi Aramco and the Public Investment Fund and all that. And the money is going to come. But for the moment, I think we can sort of look at it as a kind of joyous moment for Newcastle and some of these players, and some of these players too. And let's start with the manager, actually. You mentioned him there. There were some great stats on Eddie Howe and great info on Eddie Howe. Firstly, English coaches in general do not have a great reputation at the very, very top level. And that's because the Premier League became this massive international league in 1995, and it became harder and less sexy to bring in someone English. And so, an English person has never won the Premier League. Howard Wilkinson was the last English man to win the top division in England, which is insane, considering, every other country, major countries in terms of football in the world, Italy, Spain, France, they all have winners of their nationality and have done it multiple times. And also, this is the first English person to lift one of our domestic cups since Harry Redknapp in 2008 for Portsmouth. Before that, do you know who the last Englishman to win the League Cup was?
I read it today and I cannot remember his name.
I thought you would do it in your best impression. Have we banned the impression? Are we not allowing it?
Brandon.
No,
Brandon
your best impression that we ban from the program.
Freaky Deaky Steve McLaren.
Steve McLaren with Middlesbrough in 2004
right.
was the last.
How you say good football?
Near it up. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm glad you went with the Dutch version. That's good. That's smart. We can stick with that. So Steve McLaren, 2004. Don't do it. We'll just need to cut it if you do it.
Get back. Go back down. Go back
Get
down.
in there. Just swallow it down. So look, let me ask you on that point. You don't have to have the same investment in English coaching as I do, obviously, but it is something that I think people might think actually someone called Eddie or Harry or Steve can actually win major trophies in England.
Well, I think it goes back to the conversation we were having with regards to Thomas Tuchel's appointment with the England national team, and how many different times there was kind of this round robin discussion of, from the FA's perspective, from the licensing perspective, and I just dropped my pen for no reason. On top of that, thinking about, you do all these UEFA A and the elite coaching, coaching licenses and courses and all that stuff, but specific to the Premier League, we kind of always feel like there was that cap. And that's why I referenced thinking about Sean Deutsche and talking about Eddie Howe, because, specific to their time at Burnley and Bournemouth, respectively, how many times were we talking about those two teams taking points, major points off title contenders and being kind of like this odd little spoiler? And I specifically remember on SiriusXM talking about, well, like, at what point is somebody going to give a run like this to these type of men? Now, we can argue that Graham Potter may be an example of a guy who was given that opportunity, who came out of left field because of his success at Brighton, but bright, shiny lights, really expensive toy, that didn't work out. So again, my credit for Eddie Howe, even though Jason Tyndall annoys me to all end, and he wasn't wearing a Wham sweatshirt, so it made me even more frustrated, that to see him come in a moment where they really weren't that good and they were within touching distance of being relegated again underneath new ownership, for him to settle him down and guide them into a Champions League position in the first year, it's extraordinary. So credit to him. Fantastic. Congratulations to Newcastle. Congrats to Rocky Ray Hudson, one of the best there is in terms of supporting Newcastle and being a part of our friendship group at the channel. Yeah, overall it was
Yeah.
incredible atmosphere and some fantastic moments.
The other bit I wanted to talk about was the game itself, and I had a couple of observations, and I wanted to see what you thought about it from a more tactical standpoint. Because a few weeks ago, Newcastle lost quite comfortably at Anfield, and the big
2-0.
criticism
No.
was 2-0, February 26th, something like that. It's only about 3 weeks and change ago, and they were off them, and they tried to sort of Nottingham Forest their way through the game at Anfield and low block, and it was a really pitiful's too strong, but it was an ineffective performance
Yeah.
from Newcastle. In this particular game, they were right on the front foot from the very, very outset. They got after Quansah massively. The doubling up on Quansah from Livramento and Barnes was a key feature of the game. The midfield three, Bruno Tonali and Joe Linton, went man for man with Gravenberch, Szoboszlai and McAllister. Every Newcastle player won that physical battle. They made it a lot more physical. They got the ball in the air. They played diagonals. They did overlapping runs. They tried to make stuff happen. And I just thought what was really interesting was Liverpool had no response to a change game plan from the one 3 weeks ago. They couldn't amend it in the game. And then at the end, Dunny, it was almost a bit like I could not work out what the Liverpool formation was
Yeah.
because it was almost like Arne Slot, who has been a kind of tactical mastermind this season in games. He's made great changes in games, great substitutions, great tweaks in games. And he was a little bit like, I don't know, I'm
Yeah.
out. And Newcastle just got everything right all the way through.
Yeah. To your point about Arne Slot, at that he just emptied the bench. I mean, like that's just what he down 2-0. Why not? The back four. I thought Pope was excellent in terms of commanding what was in front of him. Kieran Trippier might be my favorite houser in the league. Sorry, Tim. I just really enjoy how antagonistic he constantly is. Even when how he gets away with not getting a yellow card for the header with Luis Diaz when Diaz goes up and he just gives him the old little chicken wing and upends him. Like the landing, by the way, was God, I thought he was going to snap like his arm bones when he hit the ground. I thought Fabian Schär and Dan Burn were fantastic with minimizing Jota. Jota, by the way, statistically, where did I have that stat? Diego Jota against Newcastle, 0 goals, 0 assists, 0 shots on target, 0 chances created, 0 key passes, 0 successful dribbles, 1 big chance, and he was hooked in the 57th minute.
Still better than Salah.
Well, so this goes to my Salah. Livramento, I thought, was excellent against Mo Salah. And for how good Mo Salah has been over the course of these last however many years at Liverpool, thinking about the individual movement, the fact that it was Kwanzaa, so maybe it's a little bit more stay at home, at least for Kwanzaa. So how much space in terms of operating internally, undercutting runs, or staying isolated 1v1 out wide. You figure like big games. Virgil van Dijk was a monster for Liverpool. He was fantastic in that game. But again, we're so used to these players playing at such an extremely high level that the moment that they're stifled, you're like, well, were they really, really bad, or do I give credit to the opponent? And for me, I got to talk about the midfield. The big difference between the starting 11s is obviously Trent Alexander is out and you've got Quansah in. Chamakis isn't starting. You've got Andy Robertson. So you've got kind of the yin and yang of good and bad across the back line. But the major point for me for Newcastle is Joe Linton.
Yeah.
And just thinking about it was kind of a meme joke after the first year of him being quote unquote the number 9, thinking about the legacy of number 9s for Newcastle United. But for him to adjust his role coming into the midfield, and I was talking about this today with Jack Collins on Counterattack, who, by the way, first time working with him, Jack's excellent. Spectaw, what a great kid. That my son, Shia, my oldest, has this crazy desire as like an attacking player to apply pressure. Like the moment he sees a pass happen, he is sprinting his ass off 15, 20 yards to go win the ball. The ball plays back to the goalkeeper. Like he's got it's in his, like there's no prompting. He's just like, I'm gonna go win the ball. I'm gonna go try to force them in a mistake. I'm gonna see if I can create havoc. And I would say probably 6 out of 10 times he's forcing a turnover because people are following him underneath. With Joe Linton, to the mentality, like the structure in your head to go from a striker into that midfield, to have the work rate, the necessity of commitment, and then understanding between him and Bruno Guimaraes and Tonali, like Tonali's got the little Gattuso in him.
Mm.
Bruno Guimaraes has a little bit of like kick the living ish out of you and upend you, little Dunga-esque to him. And then you throw Joe Linton into it, where everything is extra physical tackle. He's turned to the crowd and go, ah! And whipping his hands like into a frenzy. Like when you're with a player like that, you either think if he's like your teammate, you think he's an absolute clown, or you're like, here we go. He's on one. Let's go. Let's catch up. And I think what he does is he kind of like amps everybody up next to him to take it to that next level. Plus, dude's a fucking monster. Sorry, Tim. Like he's a freak of a monster in terms of his physical profile. So again, Dan Burn, mismatch, great bullet header. Isak, great goal, some opportunities. No Anthony Gordon. Harvey Barnes put a shift in that, who knows what this is going to look like for him individually going forward, because God knows he wants to start and he's just not playing a ton of minutes in this last year and a half. But I thought out of everyone, I thought Joe Linton was really the metronome, both offensively and defensively, for what it meant for Newcastle United as a team, and probably mimicked the fan base for the importance of the opportunity to lift a trophy.
The last bit on Newcastle, and then we'll do a little bit of Liverpool, then we'll find out what you've been up to the last few days. I want to ask you about the final from 2 years ago. Obviously, it was against Manchester United, back when they used to win things under the great Eric Ten Hag. That was just for you.
We won 2 things.
You did.
How many is Arteta? More than Arteta.
And you sacked him for the guy with the amazing hair. I think.
Hey, 7 games unbeaten, bruh.
Yeah, that's true, and they've all been very impressive. But I did want to ask you about 2 years ago. So I was at that final, and they totally froze. Like United weren't amazing on the day; they were certainly better than Newcastle deserved to win, but it wasn't like an incredible performance. Though, as I recall it, Anthony twisted Dan Burn inside and out quite a lot in the game. Played very well. The star of Real Betis now, of course. But like on the day, there was an infamous thing where our friends at the Athletic published letters from friends and family of the Newcastle players, because it was such a big thing that Newcastle had made a final. And of course, they just had that investment and, straight to the moon, Alice, and all that sort of stuff, right? And like, it was too emotional. It was so emotional, and it was such a big thing, and they didn't do it on the day. And Eddie Howe sort of references a bit in the post match, and he tried to sort of play it down, but he was like, we stayed at a quieter hotel this time. We prepared like it was a Premier League game. We didn't really talk about it like it was a cup final, but of course, most of the group had done this before. They didn't kind of over emotionalize it, for want of a real word. And I just wonder about the learning from the last cup final to this cup final, how important it was to have lost that game to play so well in this game. Like, how much does that factor into a performance like this, Dunny, do you think?
Well, I think there's 2 ways. And I can reference this from maybe U.S. men's national team perspective when talking about guys like DeMarcus Beasley or Landon Donovan. They were too young and naive to even recognize that in 2002 in the World Cup in South Korea and Japan, that they were actually playing in a World Cup in South Korea and Japan, right? It's almost like that naivete in the moment. You're just like, oh, am I supposed to be nervous? Versus like, oh my God, the pomp, the circumstance, the hotel, the tickets, all that. Like, it's a big distraction. Like, even like when we were going to the Olympics, the amount of people would be like, yo, can I get tickets? Like, can I do this? Hey, can I go with you? Like, had a girlfriend at the time or whatever, a friend at the time that was like, oh, I want to go. Like, I want to go.
You want to help, right? Because it's your big thing. So you want to do it. Yeah.
Well, I didn't help her. I was like, no, I'm gonna go up myself.
Not but other people.
Not bringing sand to the beach. So yeah, I just think there's, why would somebody do something so stupid like that? Which was really smart idea. Benefit me very, very well. No, I just think that on one hand, if you win it, you could be like, yeah, man, none of us have ever really won anything. So great. Like, it's cool. Like, when I was in a US Open Cup final and I won that with the Columbus Crew right there. Our version of the FA Cup. It was my first like really big final as a domestic footballer. And it was like, oh, dude, the history attached to this. This is amazing. Like, how great is this? But I wasn't like nervous about it. I was naive to it because I wasn't a serial champion. Whereas I think the flip side of this from a Liverpool perspective is Champions League is our goal, Premier League is our goal. Man, Carabao Cup would be nice. And yeah, like if we lose, is it big? I don't ever, I'm like you, I don't ever want to question the desire or the mentality of players, but it seemed more comfortable, I guess, than I expected
Mm.
watching the way Newcastle straight up played and negated a majority of what. And I don't know if it's Wembley, if it's a neutral site versus maybe just one player making a big difference or not making a big difference at Anfield. But there were no margins that I think Liverpool won, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like in that gray area of things that you can't really account for, the ball going your way, a slight deflection, anticipating versus reacting, my body weight going in one direction versus your body weight going in another direction. It just didn't feel like the margins were ever in favor of the
Yeah.
visitors, in the favor of the losers.
Yeah.
God, that felt good to say. Sorry, Tim.
The only other bit on that is that like I haven't changed my opinion on the League Cup, the Carabao Cup. I still would make quite swinging changes. I would get rid of the European teams. They're going to be like 8 from England next year, so they should all go. And from personal experience, I don't feel like anyone would feel worse about winning a competition that Liverpool aren't in, as long as they're consistently new winners. Like that was
Mhm.
what was magical about it. It was a new winner that not many people alive today had seen
Yeah.
this team win something, and that's what
Yeah.
made it magical. And again, I'm sure Liverpool fans would have loved winning another trophy, but I go back to sort of like Celtic and their thing about we have won the most trophies from any club in history. Like, terrific, have a biscuit. Like, in the end, like, it's not that I don't want Liverpool fans to experience happiness or Liverpool to win things or Man United to win things or the serial winners, Real
Yeah.
Madrid, to win another title. I'm happy for you to do it. I just don't want you to have it every time. And if you're having it every time because football has become this giant business leviathan, that's
Yeah.
fine. Then we need to create new avenues for other people to experience sort of happiness, which is why I'd love to see, Tottenham, from there's other teams in the Europa League. And, I'm a West Ham fan, so I'm meant to hate Tottenham. But it'd be great for them to win the Europa League because
No,
they'd get rid of this whole conversation.
no,
Sure, it'd be funny
no.
when they get knocked out to Eintracht Frankfurt, but it would be great. Like it was great for, I don't give a shit about, sorry, Tim, like Olympiacos, but that was fantastic. And Roma
Yeah.
and West Ham in the
Yeah.
Conference
Yeah.
League,
Yeah.
right? So the Carabao Cup, I'd still get rid of the European teams. Then next year, when it's won by Bournemouth, they could have this because how Bournemouth are going to experience this. They ain't. All
Yeah.
that's going to happen is a playoff or the
Well,
second tier title or something, right? We've got to
yeah, but
make
I
a
think
way for them to win things.
to your point, it's ego driven, right? From a supporter that is so used to winning things or winning a trophy every 2 or 3 years, every 4 or 5 years, it becomes an ego driven conversation as opposed to your point, if a Bournemouth wins a gummy bear cup, a Carabao Cup, Moose Cup, whatever the hell we're calling it nowadays. um, it's like West Ham in Conference League. It's like data point forever. I was there. I can tell you the shoes that I was wearing. I can tell you the outfit I had on. I can tell you where I was sat inside the stadium, and I can tell you, the bloke Bob that I hugged for 15 minutes and gave him a little belly rub face to face. Like those moments, like they're etched in your memory forever. So
Yeah.
I'm totally in line with what you're talking. I don't know if I'm completely buying it, but I'm definitely not selling. I'm not selling it for sure.
Yeah. The only other bit, just briefly, was in terms of the Champions League in midweek, Liverpool getting knocked out on the
Yeah.
Tuesday. They wouldn't have expected to get knocked out on Tuesday, having won the first leg. They would have known it was tough, but they played well. They had a plan. They thought they executed fine enough, and then they, lose in the end the way they lost. I mean, give us just how much Arnold Slot played it down because he has to, right? Of course he
Yeah.
has to. But how much of that incredibly disappointing loss on Tuesday inform the performance, the belief for Liverpool in that kind of last 10 minutes where it was 2-0 and they scored a pretty decent goal because Bruno Guimaraes got far too cocky with that pirouette and they got caught.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
But
yeah.
like, how much did Tuesday inform Sunday for Liverpool, Danny?
I think there's a couple things at play. Obviously fatigue when we're talking about lack of rotation. The fact that he went with Kelleher instead of going with Alisson, which credit to him because it was his tournament. So, you do want to see him stick to it. But when you lose, again, there's going to be reference points. This is obviously a data point. And then three, it's got to be difficult for Arne Slot and his coaching staff, right? To be so incredibly consistent. Sorry, Tim, in Premier League action, where we're March 17th and he's 12 points clear. Number
Yeah.
two, to get through the group stage as undefeated, as clean as possible, and unfortunately draw a PSG side that during the group stage was absolutely horrific in the first four matches, and then now might be a serious contender, getting through by barely 2 points clean in the group stage. And then number three, managing this tournament. Looking back, the first I think criticism is going to be, well, you should have freshened up your squad. But the reality is, like I was saying this with Jack, if you're a manager, you have to put the team that you feel is going to give you the best opportunity to win. And with the egos that are involved with these guys, and by the way, balancing Trent Alexander-Arnold, Virgil van Dijk, and Mo Salah in this conundrum of unknown of, are they going to resign? Or are they not going to resign? Like, credit to him, because it hasn't been that big of a debacle that it probably should or could be. But thinking about the egos involved, keeping people happy, like the idea of freshening up and looking down at his bench, and then like, how do you have impact players available that you trust, that they can make difference, be a difference maker, versus guys that maybe you should start, shouldn't start, blah blah blah. Curtis Jones, Darwin Núñez, Gakpo, Harvey Elliott, Chiesa. I mean, 99% of the managers around the world would look at that bench and say, Jesus fucking Christ. Sorry, Tim. That like, you shouldn't be losing games with that type of bench. So yeah, it's difficult, man. And I always wonder, like, when managers look down the bench, like psychologically, if I could rattle around inside their brain as they're looking down, like, who's an impact? Do I like, is this guy better than what I have on the field? Will I take heavy legs over what this guy's capable of doing? Like, it's just tough, man. It really is. Like, I feel for him. But again, it's going to be one of those oddities of what could have been a treble or even a quad a couple months ago, or like a treble more realistically, versus now just a Premier League, which that sounds crazy, but they're so far ahead. I think a lot of Liverpool fans have divested of this last week to say, at the bare minimum, well, at least we're going to win the Premier League, because 9 games left. I can't see a world in which they tumble so significantly without anybody else having hiccups to catch up to them.
Just wonder how much the king of the boards regrets throwing in that weakened team at Plymouth. I wonder if that's going to be a conversation now, something they might learn for next year. Anyway, look, that's the Carabao Cup final. Well done, Newcastle. The last time ever we can be happy they won a trophy, because the next run they win is going to want to make us all, mainly me, vomit blood. Anyway, you've been busy this weekend. MLS is just getting motoring. We're a couple of weeks in now. Where have you been? What game were you at? What have you learned?
I was down in San Diego, beautiful San Diego, with my man Tio Max Bretos, Marcelo Balboa, JP Navarro. It was gorgeous down there, man. I mean, by the way, suspect landing. It was like, those like like those videos of like windy day at Birmingham Airport, and like
I'm
the
getting
planes
very worried about flying to America. Don't do it. I'm getting quite stressed.
It was a huge sell coming off the U.S. Mexico border. And that coming in off the ocean, man, it was highly bouncy and a little bit slippery. But no, we had a great game. We had San Diego FC at home against your Columbus Crew. Fantastic environment. Had not been down to Snapdragon Stadium. At the end, first 45 minutes, it was Columbus. They threw a little bit of trickery, a little Dunsethery with the starting 11, went a hybrid of four, threw a bunch of different looks at San Diego. They overwhelmed San Diego in the first half. Arfston gets a goal. Should have been a second goal. Morera should have had two, potentially three. Could have been 3-0 at halftime. Arfston, he ended up fouling a player, like just bodies into somebody, takes away Morera's goal. Heading into halftime, Ingvartsen ends up pulling up with a bit of an injury for San Diego. Mikey Veras brings in Omni Valakari, whose dad was Simo Valakari, used to play for FC Dallas. Tomas Angel starts. His dad's Juan Pablo Angel. So a little bit of history right there for San Diego FC fans and MLS fans in general. But Valakari was fantastic in the second half, and the simplicity of going direct. Everyone talks about like tiki-taka, build out of the back, goalkeeper, blah, blah, blah. Mikey Veras and company just said, you know what? Screw it. Anders Dreyer, right side, going to hit a ball up over the top, force defenders to face their own goalkeeper. He was excellent as he has been since the opening day, 2-goal performance on the road at LA Galaxy. I think he's going to be a big, big hit in Major League Soccer. He gets off the back shoulder of Amundsen. Amundsen, there's a soft pass from DeJuan Jones. He gets a tug, dog so straight red. They get their goal. Valakari on a header. I got to use my rising up like a salmon shout. And then it ends 1-1 when it was all said and done. So a tale of two very, very different halves. My only complaint is it was Friday night.
Right.
It was about 2 a.m.
In San Diego. Sounds great.
And the only problem, I was in my hotel room. Dead tired, dead asleep. And I sleep light. I'm a light sleeper because of my kids. And I swear to God, Rennie, I hear the elevator ring. It's like one of those wood floor hotels.
Yeah.
Hear the elevator ring. Ding. All of a sudden, I start hearing voices. I was like, mother, no. And I hear them trotting along. And I could tell there's probably 4 or 5 women, adults, that have been having a nice little boozy night out. Good for them. Let them have a great night. But I could hear the Cheetos hitting the ground and rattling off the wall. I could hear in a drunken stupor them stuffing their faces to try to sober up just a little bit before they head to bed. And my room was down this hallway, and I could hear them current the hall. And I go, dude, please don't be 901 because I'm 902. And 901 and 902 are sharing one of those doors where it opens up into a suite if you want it. And the door underneath, it's all wood floors, everything. It was so loud. So I decided in my very exhaustive state, I became the hotel narc.
Did you?
Did you
call reception?
Oh, did I call reception? 100,000,000% I did.
Get these women in my room.
I tiptoed across the room because the stupid phone was against the window. So I had to get out of bed, butt naked, walk over, pick up the phone, have to call front desk. I like tiptoed to the other side of the room because I'm a secret narc. And I'm just like, hey, I'm sorry, I'm in 902. A bunch of girls just came upstairs. Oh yeah, we just saw him. I was like, do you mind giving them a little bit of a quick, like, please keep it down? She's like, hey, no problem. We'll send somebody up right away. So ding, hear the footsteps of Mr. Security Guard. Boom, 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 boom.
Here comes the stripper.
Ladies. Yeah, probably. Got to keep it down. People are sleeping. 2:30 in the morning. This can't happen at this hotel. Highly reputable. And I was like, Bob, that's Bob, the security guard. You're fucking amazing. Sorry, Tim. And they did a good job. The ladies went to bed. Like, they calmed down. I could still hear them, put a pillow on my head, turn my music, my sleepy music up a little bit more, fell back asleep. But unfortunately didn't run into them the next day. But I did see the Cheeto on the ground. Poor wounded soldier got left behind.
So you ruined Becky's hen do because you wanted to get some sleep, basically.
Hey, man. Gaslamp District. No, Gaslight District. San Diego. Great experience. It's St. Patrick's Day weekend. Everyone's getting sloshed. Have a great time. Just please, I need my beauty sleep. Just let me have my beauty
But when
sleep.
you get to the hotel, it's sleepy time. Outside the hotel, party time.
Yeah, do your own thing.
Inside the hotel, sleepy time.
What do we always say? Rennie, shut the fuck up.
Shut the fuck up. Sorry, Tim. What else happened this weekend? Lionel Messi scored a great goal. Everyone loves that.
Yeah, he and Brad Guzan. I mean, they've created. This goes back to Copa America's Centenario, U.S. against Argentina, and Messi hit this bomb of a free kick, upper corner, killed the cobwebs. So there's a history between them. And then last year, Atlanta dumping Inter Miami out of the playoffs despite a 40-point regular season gap between the two teams. But it got to the point where the first ball in, Messi ends up just scoop. Great goal. Fantastic. But even after that goal, which was a huge mistake in the buildup by Bartosz Slisz, the polar bear, Brad Guzan, was excellent. Like, his reaction saves, kick save down to the right-hand side. And it was in the second half after that kick save, Messi came through and gave him like a dap up, like that's a great save. Like, so there's an incredible amount of respect there. Unfortunately, they lost. Inter Miami's cooking. The Western Conference is all over the place. Like, nobody had Vancouver undefeated start of the season. They've been fantastic. San Diego's been looking good. Who else? Olaf Melberg with the best beard in the history of Major League Soccer. He and St. Louis City have started off strong. It's been really, really weird in the Western Conference, the Eastern Conference. It's kind of the who's who of what you're expecting. But there's already some major concerns, whether you're Montreal, New England, or your Toronto FC out there in the in the Eastern Conference, you're in big trouble. On the Western Conference, LA Galaxy have a point, Houston have a point, Kansas City have a point, but you're 4 games in. So you're looking for a little bit more. And Phil Neville and the Portland Timbers, they kind of got hosed last night with a dodgy non-call that should have been a penalty in the dying moments of the game against LA Galaxy. Points were split that night. So weird sport, but we're already kind of understanding what teams are looking like and which teams are either in need of some serious help or which managers are in some serious trouble.
Can you still buy someone? Is the transfer window like open still? Can
Still
Crew
open.
get a striker in? Like someone's got to come in, haven't they?
Yeah, no, and this is so I had this conversation with Wilfred Nancy, one of my favorite coaches in Major League Soccer, talking about now with the introduction of cash for player trade, where you can effectively go in, and we saw this with Dejan Joveljic leaving LA Galaxy, going to Sporting Kansas City, Evander leaving Portland, going to Cincinnati, Lucho leaving Cincinnati and going to Dallas, that you can effectively buy players from within the league.
Yeah.
But because of the mechanisms at play, here's the dilemma for the owner and or general manager. And this is the discussion that I think you're going to hear more and more about. Do owners want cash in hand? Meaning, do you want just straight up $4 million for a player?
Yeah.
Or do you want like $3 million of general allocation money? So general allocation money, for those that are like a bit confused, you can effectively use that for anything. You can buy players down. You can switch their categories from designated players or U22 or TAM or any of the excess spend. You can use that on the complexity of your roster, however you want to spend it. So the theory is that general allocation money is almost 2-to-1 value, meaning that because it has so many different variations of usage, general allocation money, like LA Galaxy, 0 GAM. They have 0 general allocation money. San Diego has over 4 million. Real Salt Lake has 3.5 million. So it's all about the complexity about there's not one size that fits all with how rosters are constructed. So what it tells you is LA Galaxy went all in last year, and now they're suffering the consequences this year. So with Wilfred Nancy in Columbus, just thinking about making this move, do you want to go find someone in the league that is already, adapted to the lifestyle, understanding the culture, has the rigors of what the travel looks like? Or do you want to go outside the league and take a risk, which sometimes pays off, like Cucho paid off, or sometimes it fails miserably for, say, an Aaron Bupuenza that was at FC Cincinnati a year and a half ago. So again, there's so many fun complexities. Like, it's fun to put on your fake general manager's hat and think about how teams are going to build out. But certainly Columbus is more than aware that, and I wrote this during the broadcast, that the margins for error are thinner than they were last year, because when you get rid of Cucho, who had 19 goals, 14 assists, and somehow you kind of walk in the Christian Ramirez conversation, it's going to look a little bit different. It's going to feel a little bit different. And maybe you're not going to score as many goals, which means you can't alleviate some of the pressure on your back line. So those are the moments. But do you strike while the iron's hot right now and maybe weaken some of the teams throughout Major League Soccer? And the whole theory of like, do you want to strengthen a team in your conference, or would you rather strengthen a team in the opposite conference so you don't have to face them? There's a lot of chess pieces that are moving around right now, but we'll see how it all plays out. But the summer, I believe, is going to be extremely active in Major League Soccer.
Yeah, someone's got to come in. Someone's got to come in there.
Yeah.
Listen, let's do some quick winners and losers from the weekend. Give us a winner of the weekend from some stories you've not covered yet.
Yeah, I'm going to go with. You're going to hate this, but I'm going to go with Fulham. The performance that Fulham put in, and the fact that Ryan Sessegnon just body bagged Tottenham Hotspur this weekend is phenomenal. And to the point where the Tottenham Lunacy group chat, Headley and Gabe Ortiz, was so quiet after I got on the airplane, and by the time I landed, that game was done and dusted, that I literally had to put the emoji with the zipper closed because I knew none of them wanted nothing to do with it. So credit to Fulham. I thought the performance overall, top to bottom, was fantastic. Muniz, by the way, the jump and the celebration, how he cleared him is unbelievable from an athletic standpoint. But yeah, I just wanted to give Fulham a shout. And hopefully, if Ben Jacobs is indeed correct on the potential for a European spot qualifier going all the way down to team number 11, and that's like also includes Aston Villa needs to win Champions League,
Yeah.
then hopefully Fulham gets a good shout for a European spot.
Yeah, it's likely to be 8. I think we're looking at 8 probably with Newcastle in the top 5. But we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. For me, my winner of the weekend, my hero, I want to say Anthony Elanga.
Hmm.
Only because like Forest were great. It was Ipswich away, so fair enough. But they are going to be in the top 5 this season. They're going to be in the Champions League. Tremendous story for Nottingham Forest. But the reason I'm picking out Anthony Elanga is he did one of my favourite things in football. He scored a goal. I think it was Forest second, and then pointed to the Adidas logo on his shirt and not the Nottingham Forest logo, which he was on the other side of the chest, which I absolutely love when they do that. So it's like, Forest, we're the best, we're amazing. And it's like, oh no, I love Adidasler,
Yeah.
which is excellent. So they're amazing. It's a great story. Anthony
Yeah.
Elanga and Hudson-Odoi and Gibbs White actually in the England squad now because Cole Palmer's pulling out. He should have been there the first time, but Thomas Tuchel, I think, is not watching any games. So that's great. So Nottingham Forest, Anthony Elanga, and he's amazing. Like, it's like when Vinny Jr. the other week was like, look at this, look at this, look at this. And he thought it was the European champions tag, and it was HP printers, which was just amazing. I loved
Beautiful.
that. Loved it.
Yeah.
Give us a loser.
I'm gonna go with Big Ange Postecoglou. I wasn't a big fan of the post-match quotes. First off, I saw some of the videos when he was getting some, I would say, friendly banter from his own supporters.
And he just
And
stops.
yeah, he stops and he gives the look. And but Matthews tell, I think maybe there's a dichotomy of a conversation somewhere around there about the, experience of Bundesliga fans, German experience where you
Yeah.
do have the connectivity with the fans. So you go over and you have the conversation versus more of a standoffish kind of Englishism that happens sometimes around Premier League. But Big Ange, he's certainly a lot more crotchety nowadays based on how poor they've been throughout the course of the season. He's got plenty of excuses and he's got the injuries. But what I didn't like was post match him talking about because something to the effect of because we don't complain about the referees, we probably are punished by that. And I was like, what in the flying squirrel are you talking about? Like, what do you want? Like, pick a side. Like, pick a lane. Do you want to be Mr. Nice Guy that has a very authentic take to how whatever the subject is that he's talking about? Or do you want to be the guy that bitches and moans and then tries to utilize social media and utilize the press into these narratives that don't exist whatsoever? Because I went back like trying to find the moments that he could have been possibly referring to, and they're all like ticky-tacky, inconsequential moments during the game that you're like, that's not a game-changing moment. That's not a game-defying moment. So I don't know. It's just I liked him so much in the beginning, and little by little, it's it's like dating a girl for 6 months, right? It's like 6 months in, they say something like, "Ooh, I didn't know you had that one in you. That's a."
Yeah. It's that, I always think of that great joke from the comedian Lee Evans, who's like, when you're first dating a girl and she's brushing her teeth and she gets some toothpaste in her face, you're like, oh, wipe that off, darling. That's
Yeah.
beautiful. And after 6 months, you're like, get that fucking toothpaste off your face. It's disgusting. Sorry, Tim. And that's basically what's happening now with Postecoglou.
He's so picky.
6-month girlfriend with toothpaste on her face. He was going to be my villain as well. So yeah, Postecoglou
Okay.
squaring up with his own fans. I don't think he's long for Tottenham. If he wins the Europa League, yes. Without winning the Europa League,
He's
I
not
don't think
winning the
he's got a
Europa
chance.
League because the
No.
final is already set for Manchester United, Tottenham. But I'm not sure he gets past Eintracht Frankfurt with the
Yeah,
way
me
that this
neither.
team plays.
Yeah, if he doesn't win it, I don't think he makes the end of the season. But that's it. You can't be squaring up to your own fans. That's not a great idea, mate. Anyway, that is it. Where are you this week? Are you covering? What are you covering? Where are you?
So I'm going to be with Dean Smith, Wilfred Zaha, and Charlotte FC against Ruth and San Jose Earthquakes. Cannot wait. I get to have one of our phone calls with Bruce Arena probably on Thursday or Friday. But yeah, I'm off Friday, across the country, Bank of America Stadium. I've never been to Charlotte. I've been to the city, but I've
Looks
never
cool.
called a game in Charlotte. And you're going to look to like between 35, 45,000, the atmosphere, the King's chair, all of those things. I'm like really, really, really excited to see what the culture is because it's a huge hotbed for like youth soccer, semi-pro soccer, college soccer, pro soccer now. So yeah, I'll be out in Charlotte this weekend with TO Max. Pablo Ramirez, Profe, two of the most iconic Spanish broadcasters in the United States and Mexico as well. Two of my favorites. It's going to be an absolute blast. Get to see my guy Kenny Neal. Can't wait.
Amazing. We'll catch up on all of that next week. This has been the Week in the Tackle podcast. If you enjoyed the program, subscribe on all possible platforms. Leave us a 5-star review, and you can also watch the program in full on YouTube. Something I was meant to say in the middle of the program, but forgot. See you next time, everybody.
Cheers.